Drawing a cat is way easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it, no matter your skill level. Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. With that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. So the first thing to do, as usual, is to create a new canvas. Now the size really depends on your own project, and if you're not sure, I have a video that explains everything you need to know in order to choose your canvas size. And if you're curious, these are the dimensions that I will be using in this demo. And we're going to start by sketching the cat. So to do that, go ahead and create a new layer and rename it Sketch. And I'm going to challenge you for the sketch not to erase, and you're going to see what I mean by that in just a few seconds, but keep that in mind. So for the color, you can use whatever you like. I like to go with just a neutral gray. And in this tutorial, I'm always going to be suggesting two brushes. So one will be a free brush that comes with Procreate, and the other one will be a brush that you would use if you want to bring your art to the next level, get more professional results, and maybe even save some time. But for the sketch, the brush really doesn't matter that much since we won't see it in the final result. I recommend you use either the HB pencil from the sketching panel, or if you have my illustration bundle, you can use, of course, the sketching brush. And we're going to start by very roughly placing the main shapes for the cat. So start with a kind of circle for the head, and then an oval, which is pretty much the same height as the head for the body, and then a slightly smaller circle on one of the sides that is going to be kind of the butt. And then you can simply go in and connect the shapes, which is going to create the spine of the cat. So again, you can see here I'm being super rough, super loose, and you really don't have to be more precise. You might also want to kind of mark the center of the head and the center of the front of the body, just as guides to kind of help you place the elements. And you can also definitely play with the shape of the head. So you can have a cat that has, a super square head or like a bean shape like mine. And then all you have to do is add some ears. Just like for the head, you can really play with the size and the shape of the ears. I like to go with super big triangular ears that are a little bit rounded. You're then going to go back in and mark 3 lines to kind of delimitate the forelegs. So you can see here, they were pretty much already marked. I'm just kind of making them a bit darker to know that these are going to be lines that I use later. And the hind legs are super easy as well. Just draw an oval near the butt and then kind of drag the same height and draw another half of an oval on the other side of the cat, so near the forelegs. If you can add little paws as well, I like to just draw, again, super tiny little ovals, nothing too crazy here. And the tail is really another space where you get to experiment and personalize your cat. So you can have different sizes, different thickness, different length. Really, the tail is a great way of creating a cat that is unique to you and doesn't look exactly like this tutorial. And at this point, you should have a very rough outline of your cat. All we're missing is the face. So we're just going to dive in and add the eyes. And you can see I like to go with fairly big round eyes, but again, you could go with small eyes, whichever you like. Same thing for the nose. I like to go with an oval, and then I like to go with this cute W mouth, but these are other features that you could easily change or tweak to make your cat feel more like your cat. And I also like to add little whiskers, 3 on the chin, not the chin, the cheeks, and then 2 in each ears. I just think it's super cute. You might also want to go and increase the size of your brush to go in and really roughly sketch the iris. Is it the iris or is it the pupil for animals like this? I'm not sure, but basically drawing the black circle in the middle of your eyes. So by now your cat should look super cute, but if it's not quite right, don't worry, I'm going to show you a trick that can really help you kind of identify what doesn't look quite right in your sketch so that you can fix it before adding the color. So go ahead and click on the arrow icon here at the top and select flip horizontal. And it's probably going to jump right at you. You're going to see what's wrong probably immediately because this is kind of a way of getting a fresh look on your sketch. So, sometimes, especially if you're working on big projects, I always recommend that you kind of take a few hours, even a day, or like a few days away from a piece before you move on to the next phase. If you don't honestly have the time, this is a really great tip to still get some sort of a fresh look on your piece and kind of go in and tweak everything that you've drawn so far just to make it look a little bit better. And seriously, here again, I'm not erasing or anything. I'm just going in and drawing thicker lines and lines that are a bit darker to kind of show which line of all the lines that I've drawn so far I'm gonna go with in the final result. So your sketch doesn't need to be any more precise than this. And once you have a basic shape of a cat that you like, you can go ahead and change the blending mode of your sketch to multiply and lower the opacity until you can just barely see your sketch. You're then going to create a new layer that you're going to put below the sketch, and you're going to rename it to cat or base. That is up to you. And you can go obviously whichever color you want for your cat to be. I'm gonna go with just like an orange brown, but think of making it slightly darker than the final color you want for your cat, because we're going to be adding textures later. Now for the brush, you can use in the airbrushing panel the hard brush, and if you've watched my other tutorials for watercolor, make sure that the opacity is back to 100%. And if you have my illustration bundle, you can use the base round brush. And at this step, all you need to do is to outline the silhouette of your cat. And make sure you really take your time here. It's not complicated, but you want your silhouette to be absolutely perfect, because that is what's going to be the base for everything else that we work on later. So take your time here, and also make sure that all your lines, like there's no gap between your lines, no holes in the outline, because when we use the autofill, if there's a hole, it's just going to fill in the entire canvas as opposed to just the silhouette of your cat. So feel free to pause the video and we'll meet at the next step once we have our outline completed. Great, so once you have your outline, all you need to do is to fill in the color, so you can just drag your color onto the shape and it's going to automatically fill it in. Again, make sure there's no gap in your outline, otherwise the entire canvas is going to be filled with your color. And we're going to add some really cool texture on this cat. So go ahead and create a new layer, rename it to texture, and I'm going to show you a really cool trick. So this texture layer we're going to apply as a clipping mask, and the way to do that is just to tap on the layer, and then you're going to be able to select clipping mask. You're then going to go back to your color and make it slightly lighter. And for the brushes, you have a few options. You can go either in the sketching panel again, if I can find it, there we go, and pick the 6B pencil. Otherwise, if you have my illustration bundle, which by the way is linked in the description below along with a special promo code for the YouTube people, if you have that, you can use the basic texture brush, of course. And all we're going to do is we're going to fill in our cat like I was saying. And I have a little tip for you here. When you're trying to fill in a large surface, kind of like this, just think of the movement of your wrist. Instead of doing zigzags like this, try to do kind of little loops. Of course, more condensed, but practicing this movement with your wrist is going to be really great when you have to cover a large surface with a texture. It's just going to make the texture more smooth, and everything is going to kind of blend in together in the best way possible. So that's a really simple tip, but I think it makes a big difference. So if you're able to practice that, definitely try to incorporate it in your routine. Now going back on your cat layer, so the base layer, you might want to adjust the hue, saturation, brightness. So in this magic wand menu, you have kind of this option to change the entire color of your layer. So that's really helpful if you want to just tweak the background. Here I felt like I couldn't see the texture quite enough, so I went ahead and just darkened the cat layer. Once you have that done, go ahead and create a new layer on top of the texture, apply it as a clipping mask, and rename it to extra. So on this extra layer, you would be drawing like all the markings or the specific little fun secondary colors on the fur. So again, this is a step where you can really experiment and make your cat feel super unique. I'm still using the same brush, but this time instead of just drawing, really big strokes for like a quick cover of the entire cat with the texture, I'm actually kind of going in and starting to mark the direction of the fur. So in this video, we're definitely not going to try and draw a realistic fur. That's not the point. But when you're drawing texture, kind of keeping in mind the actual direction of every little hair or the strands of hair and kind of drawing your strokes in the same direction can be really helpful. So you don't have to actually go in and draw all the hairs, but if you do keep in mind the directions of the hair and try to match that with the directions of your stroke, that's a really great way of just kind of simply showing hair. So yeah, here you can see I'm just adding some whites and some spots, but again, here you can totally experiment. If you have a cat at home, that's the right time to make it look like your cat by just adding some little details, or if you're just wanting to create your own magical cat, you could draw, I don't know, like stars or moons, or I don't know what I'm talking about, but really here this step is just all about making your cat feel unique. So really experiment, go crazy here, and just have fun. And guys, if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and comment the word kitten. I know it sounds crazy, but it gives me a lot of insight into how to pace and edit my videos better, which helps me create better tutorials for you guys. And it's also really cool because you guys know me, but I don't know you. So whenever you leave a comment, I get to see your name, your username, sometimes even a picture, and it's just so nice to see the wonderful creative community that we've built here on this channel. So go ahead and comment the word kitten, and we'll keep going. Okay, so by now your cat should look kind of cool, but also a little bit crazy because, I mean, there's no face, there's no detail or anything. So we're going to fix that. But before that, we're going to add some shadows. So go ahead and create a new layer, apply it as a clipping mask again, and rename it to Shadows. This layer, you're going to change the blending mode of and set it to linear burn, and you're going to lower the opacity for now around 50%, nothing too precise here. Now for my shadows, I like to go with a gray that is a little bit purple, a little bit blue, but you could experiment and try and see what you personally like. And you're going to keep the same brush that we've been using so far, so either the 6B pencil or the basic texture. And you can put the shadows, again, depending on your own scene. So if you have your cat in an environment, you want to make sure that your shadows are coherent with the environment. But in my case here, since it's just a cat on a white background, what I like to do is simply draw the shadows where two parts of the body overlap. So you see I have a shadow on the tail where, you know, the butt overlays or overlaps the tail. Then I have one below the head, and now I'm just kind of drawing between the legs and the paws so that everything kind of starts being separated and not just like this with one big cat blob shape situation. And here I'm really using the same motion that we've been using so far with the textured brush. So these little super tight loops. And if you want to create gradients, so starting your shadow darker and then make it lighter, simply press a lighter on your pencil the more you go. So if you have pressure sensitivity, so if you have an Apple pencil, for example, you're going to be able to create gradients just by pressing harder or lighter. So definitely experiment with that. It might need a little bit of practice, but that's going to be super useful when you're drawing illustrations. That being said, once you're done, go ahead and create a new layer, and we're going to start drawing the eyes. So rename this layer to Eyes. This one is not a clipping mask. Now for the eyes, you can use a lot of colors. I like to go with either a really bright yellow or a super bright apple or lime green. You could use a white, but I think it's fun with cats to kind of experiment. Now for the brush, you could use in the airbrushing panel, again, either the hard brush or in my illustration bundle, the round base brush. So the same one that you use to map out the shape of your cat, like the base layer shape. And you're just going to outline the eyes and then fill them in. Once you have your basic eyeballs, go ahead and create a new layer. This one you're going to rename to Iris, although I'm still not sure if it's the iris or the pupil, but we're gonna go with that. And this time you can use either the outlines brush from my illustration bundle or the 6B pencil still. And you're going to go with a super dark gray, not quite black because we're going to go ahead and add some shadows. And you're just going to go ahead and, like we did on all the other steps, you're going to outline the pupil or the iris or whatever and then fill it in. And you can fill it in either using the color drop feature or fill it in manually, depending on if you want a super solid color or color that has a little bit of texture in it. So you can see on the right I have this super solid color, and then on the left I have a little bit more texture. So experiment with that and just go with what you prefer. This iris layer we're going to apply as a clipping mask. I forgot about that, but there we go. And then we're going to create a new layer on top of it, renaming it to shadows. And that's where we're going to add the shadows for the eyes. So this one is also going to be applied as a clipping mask. So just like for the other shadows, you're going to change the blending mode to linear burn and lower the opacity somewhere around 50%. And you're going to go back to your grayish, purplish color, or whichever color you use for the shadow. And I like to add the shadow just kind of like in this top half diagonal part of the eyes, if that makes any sense. And it's super simple, but it's details like this that really bring a lot of life to your final piece. And speaking of life, we're going to add a lot more by creating a new layer, rename it to light, not life. And we're going to change the blending mode of this one to add. For the opacity right now, put it at 50, but we're going to come back to it. And just go ahead and pick white. And with the same brush, you're going to draw little dots in the eyes that kind of overlap a little bit of black and then a little bit of the yellow-green color. So once you have that, you can just play with the opacity and find something that you like. And don't forget that the sketch layer is still on top of everything, so you might want to hide it just to see that white color kind of shine through and see if the opacity is where you want it to be. And with that, we're ready to bring everything together. But before, just go ahead and group all of your eyes layer, and the way to do that is just in your layer panel, swipe all the eyes layer towards the right and then click group. And you can click on this arrow to collapse the group, and then you can rename the group to eyes. That just makes everything a little bit more organized in your file. It's just good to do. Once that is done, go ahead and create a new layer above the eyes group and rename it to details. And this is where the magic's going to happen, guys. So make sure you stick around until the end. And for the details, you can use either the outlines brush or, again, in the sketching panel, the 6B pencil, the famous 6B pencil. And what you're going to do here, or what I recommend you do, is you go in and try to find a dark, like a fairly dark, or like the darkest color actually of the fur of the cat, and then select that and use that as your color to outline. And here when I say outline, you're gonna see I'm not saying like a black cartoonish straight super precise outline. You can see I'm kind of almost sketching around my cat, and this is really what I recommend you do as well. You could definitely go with more the cartoonish look with a perfectly straight black outline, but this quick rough feel for the outlines here is going to look really good when combined with the texture that we've been building so far on the cat. So you can see I'm just drawing short little lines to kind of outline everything, and this is another step where you really don't have to erase. If you make one little line that doesn't look quite right, I quite recommend that instead of erasing, you just undo and then try again. That way you're going to get lines that are way more fluid, and the overall piece is probably going to look way less stiff than if you're trying to kind of get the perfect line the first time, or just get the perfect line by drawing a little bit, erasing a little bit, drawing a little bit, erasing a little bit. You know, you get the point. So this is a really interesting tip as well, because you know, you cannot do that. You cannot undo with pencil and paper. But if you're kind of practicing with digital art to be more confident in your line because you know you're not going to erase, that's going to translate to your real life, like paper, pencil drawings as well, because you're going to be more confident if you practice that way with digital art. So once you have your outlines, you can go in and add the facial features, and by that I mean the mouth and the nose. And you can see that the nose, I kind of like to make it look a little bit like a heart, so it's not a perfect ellipse, it is a little bit more like a heart shape. And at this point you can also go ahead and hide your sketch layer to just kind of see what you're really working with. And this is another step that is not super complicated, but that you should really take your time to get it to be exactly like you want it to be. I also personally really like to add little groups of hair, so we're not drawing the entire fur texture, but this can make your cat look less like plastic and more like cat. So it's like little groups of 2, 3, 4 hair sprinkled here and there over your cat. I also like to go back in on the nose with a slightly darker version of my color, so mostly on the bottom of the nose, and again with super light, simple, sketch-like strokes. And also I go over the mouth just so that these features, they look more important than the rest of the outlines and they draw the eye in a little bit more. And speaking of the eye, you might want to go and draw your outlines for the eyes actually in the eyes group. So you would just create a new layer above of everything in the eye groups, of course, rename it to line, and there you could go and draw the eye outline. The reason you might want to do that is if you want to move the eyes, you're just going to be able to select the group and just move it around. And if your eyes, or if the eye outlines were kind of on the same layer as the other outlines, then they would not move with the rest of the eyes. So anyway, just a thing that I personally do because I tend to move the eyes around quite a lot. I'm not doing it in this piece, but that's something that I tend to do a lot when I draw children's books illustrations. Anyway, once you have your eyes outline eyes, you can go back to your detail layer, reactivate your sketch, and pick a cream color or a gray color depending on your background to go ahead and add the whiskers. Are they still called whiskers if they're in the ears? I don't know. If you know, please comment below. Seriously, I'm curious. And at this point, you should have most of your details and outlines drawn on your cat, but it looks a little bit boring and a little bit dead, so we're going to bring it back to life. I'm going to show you a few really simple tips. The first one being grouping all of our layers. So from the base cat layer to the details layer, we create a big group that we rename to cat. Now, don't worry if your cat still doesn't look quite right. At least mine still doesn't look quite right. So with your cat group selected, you can use the arrow tool to flip your canvas again, and this is going to show you what looks weird. So in my case, it's still the face. And if you open the adjustment panel, you can select liquify at the bottom. And if you set your liquify to push, you're going to be able to move the color around. And you would not use that to completely morph the shape of your cat. So like you would not turn your cat into like a unicorn or an alligator or something, completely different. But that can kind of help you fix the shape a little bit without having to redraw everything. Just make sure that you don't overdo it because you might stretch the pixels and then your image is going to look low quality just because you moved everything around too much. And once you're done, you can just click back on your arrow tool, flip it, and your cat should look a little bit better, hopefully. And before moving on to the final touches that are going to make the biggest difference, I'm going to just put the cat in the middle of my canvas. So I use the snapping function that showed me all the little guys. You can definitely do that. And once your cat is exactly where you want it to be, you're going to go ahead and open your cat group, and right above the shadows layer, you're going to create a new layer. This one is also going to be clipping mask, and you're going to set the blending mode to add. You might want to lower the opacity, but we're going to come back to it later. Now for the color, I'm going to go with a super light yellow because we're going to be drawing the lights. And for the brush, you can use either the basic texture brush or again, the famous 6B pencil. And I like to do this thing with lights where I don't really draw volumes. I just kind of go ahead and on the opposite sides of my shadows, of course, I kind of add a second outline, if that makes sense. So you can see it's a very thin light line on one side of the cat, and that's really helpful into making it pop. You're gonna see it looks like a totally different drawing already. So you can just go ahead and on one side of your cat, on all the different body parts or cat parts, you're going to draw this very thin, super simple light line. And wow, it just looks so much better, and it's so simple, but yeah, it makes such a big difference, doesn't it? And you can definitely go back and lower the opacity or up the opacity of that layer just so you can find something that you like. And I forgot to rename this layer, but you would rename it to light. You would also create a new layer on top of everything, so above your details layer, but still in the cat group, and rename it to freckles. Now, I'm going to use the freckles brush that comes with the illustration bundle, but sadly there's no similar brush that comes with Procreate, but basically it's just like little hand-drawn speckles. So you could go ahead and draw them yourself if you don't have the illustration bundle. And this layer, really, there's no specific blending mode that you need to use. You can just go ahead and pick and choose and see what you like. And you can also do the same thing with the color. So I'm just going with the same color as I used for my lights, but you could go with a totally different color. Like you could add blue or something, because basically all we want to do here is add a little bit more dimension, a little bit more texture to the piece. And the final thing we're going to do is create a shadow layer for the ground. So put that layer below the cat group. And you're going to go back to the color that you used for your shadows, so this grayish purplish color. Going back to the basic texture brush or the 6B pencil, you're going to draw a shadow below your cat. So this is just going to help set him in the environment or on your your white background. It's just going to situate him a little bit more, or her a little bit more. And it's just making the piece feel a little bit more complete and finished in general.
And if you enjoyed drawing this cat and you're now wondering, how do I draw more cute animals? Well, I highly recommend that you go and watch this video in which I'm going to teach you how to draw exactly that, more cute animals. So just click on this link right here and I'll see you there.